Today I'm delighted to welcome back a guest who's joined us a few times here on the Celtic Exchange. It's Jim Orr. Jim, we spoke most recently when you joined me for the battle to save Celtic, and there's a wee bit of crossover here, there's a few things that tie in, but first of all, good to see you back in the studio. How's things going? How's your pre-season?
Aye, good. The fixtures came out this morning, so let the madness recommence in a few weeks' time. Looking forward to it. I always like the close season. You get a chance just to chill a bit, because once it starts, we're all full on at that point in time, and we're all questioning everything that's happening. And we lose a goal and it's a crisis, and that'll be important at the end of the season. We shouldn't have lost that goal. So looking forward to the season when it starts, but enjoying the kind of Celtic downtime.
I think given the way last season ended and all the ups and downs and the madness that ensues,
we're all knackered.
That's what a few boys said.
Knackered.
Do you know what? A break came along at the right time. See the way the season played out. Celtic, the final 5 games, winning all 5 games, but it was Hearts and it was Rangers. You're down to Killie, you were flag trophy day, Scottish Cup final, amazing stuff.
That's what you want. That's what you want.
A wee break's not a bad thing either.
That's what you want. I mean, it wasn't a great season up until the last couple of months, and then it became a title race, and then it became exciting, and for me, that's what you want. I mean, obviously, it's good to come out on top at the end of it. It'd have been a disaster if we didn't do that. But for me, if you win the league by 20 points. We're in the wrong league. We should be in a different league. That's where we are. So I like the title races as long as we come out on top of them, because it's far more satisfying when you do that, and you look back at pivotal moments and you think, that was good. And big chap Ida coming in, without Ida we don't win the double and whatever, the last minute goals and stuff like that. And so you then reflect on that. But I said a few times before that history's written by the winners. If we hadn't won that, then it's a different narrative out there. But we have won it, and let's hope we start signing players pretty soon, because we don't want another season like last season.
Yeah, work to be done there. You mentioned Adam Ida, so his late winner at Hampden means we've now won 7 trophies of the last 9, Jim, and if you want to extend that picture even wider, it's 37 trophies since the turn of the century, and it's a world away from the time in Celtic's history that we're going to chat about today, isn't it?
Indeed. Aye, that sounds no bad actually when you say it that way. The play, if I jump into the play, is called And If You Know the History, with a wee question mark at the end of it, and it takes place over 7 seasons from 1988, just after we've won the Centenary double, up into the share issue, sort of late 94, early 95, and it's a period that you covered in your excellent series, The Battle to Save Celtic, where you had some phenomenal guests and me, and a lot of that stuff we're going to touch on today, I'd imagine. And I think if we had this chat 9 months ago, maybe you'd be finding lots of things you never knew about, whereas today it'll be like, more than me, and it'll be like Maurice Johnson, aye, that's in it. Brian Dempsey, aye, that's in it. Terry Kit, aye, that's in it. So basically I tried to cover as much of the stuff, and there's been a huge amount of stuff, and you found that yourself, Tino, when doing the research, and you said yourself, you thought you knew half the story. You didn't know half the story because there were so many things. And when you're writing a play, the difficult thing is to try and get most of the main stuff in, and usually, writing plays, which for me is just a hobby. I always find it quite strange when they say, Jim, we're a playwright, and you think, no, that sounds like a job. That's an electrician or a lawyer. I've just kind of stumbled into this, and it's a hobby, and I've been very fortunate to find this really fun hobby that's meant that I've got to meet Bertie, I've met Harold Brattbakk, I've met Tino. It's been great. So getting all the things in, and usually a play for me is around about 14,000 words, which is not a lot of words, basically. And that's when I first fell into this. I thought I'd have a go at it. I could never write a book. A book's about 70,000, 80,000 words, and that's just too much. But a play is fairly simple to write. So anyone out there who fancies writing a play, do it. It's not that difficult. I'm not saying it'd be any good, but when you think 14,000 words, 1,000 words a day, you write a play in 2 weeks. I'm not saying it'd be any good. But so anyway, this one started off about 25,000 words, and then bit by bit you're trying to get it down, and you're having to cut out a lot of stuff, but to make sure you've got the main points in it, because those are the kind of touchstones. I think we maybe call that you need to include that and need to include that. So that's been difficult, because the 2 Celtic plays that I've done previously, Bendel and Brattbakk and Bendel and Bertie, I've been fortunate that sort of feedback's been pretty positive with them. And Bendel and Brattbakk covers the season that we stopped at 10. So that was a season, and Bendel and Bertie was maybe 4 months at the start of 65, when we win the Scottish Cup, Bertie comes back, Jock comes back. So those are much smaller time periods. Whereas if you're covering 7 years and so many things are happening, then you have to be quite ruthless about what you're going to try and keep in. So when you start asking me the question today, hopefully it's almost like bingo, and I'll be saying, it's in, that's in. And you can't say too much about it.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. In the play, because you then start to get a bit boring. Because in actual fact, the story itself, if you take all the emotion away from the story, it's not much of a story, really. It's a wee company in the East End of Glasgow in 1988, which is turning over about 3 or 4 million quid a year. New government legislation comes in. They struggle to cope with that. Financial difficulties. An entrepreneur comes in, buys them over, refinances the company, sells it for a few bob and gets off his mark. That's it. That's the story. However, if you're talking about Celtic, that's a different thing. If you're talking about 7 seasons and the pain and the agony, and I know in social media they refer to the Celtic-daft and all this stuff. So this is a wee chance for you to kind of live what the Celtic-daft had to live at the time, although you know there's a happy ending at the end of it.
I was going to say, I mean, your plays generally, Jim, are humorous, but you're basically inviting folk to come along and relive some pain. Is that the...
Oh, aye, it's all about pain. But you know there's a happy ending,
mm-hmm.
which is good. Because the first... how I get the idea of maybe writing plays, my sister's in the show business, and she was involved in the Celts in Seville, written by Tony Roper back in 2008, and she asked me to help out. Could I find a Boa Vista scarf? Could I do this? Could I do that? And because I did all this work, Tony Roper asked me to want to come through to something called a table read. I come along and I get to this table read, and it's only 60 pages, and I'm thinking that's a kind of long email for me. I could maybe do that. So, what was the point of this story? A bit of a tangent there.
Well, let me ask you a question. So you mentioned Bend It Like Bertie and Bend It Like Brattbakk, and they're on quite kind of focused time. So yep, the stop in the 10th season is Bend It Like
Information
Brattbakk.
sort of button there, bzzz, it suddenly dawned on me.
Go for it.
And so the Celts in Seville doesn't have a happy ending, basically. And I went to see it 3 times because I went freebies, basically, and I'm standing in the queue, and there was a couple of old dealers in there, and I said, "You'll love this, it's brilliant, I've seen it, but it's not got a very happy ending." "Oh, what happened, son?" "Well, we lose, you know."
Have you seen the Titanic?
Aye, it was brilliant ending. So it's important that you know that there is a happy ending. So Bend It Like Brattbakk, we know what's going to happen. And the thing about this particular one, the kind of working title I had for this was Bend It Like the Bunnet for a while, but I kind of felt as if this is nothing. Well, I know Fergus saves the day at the end of the day, but it's not about Fergus McCann.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to have to explain that, because we did Bend It Like Bertie. It wasn't about Bertie Auld. It was about that 65 times, telling the story of how that worked, how bad the club, what a state they were on, and it wasn't about Bertie. I mean, after his sad passing, added a bit more to it to make it a bit more about Bertie's life. And Bend It Like Brattbakk was never about Harold Brattbakk. And I've met Harold, and he said a few times, "I need to come and see this." And I'm thinking, don't know about that, because basically you've seen it.
Have, yeah.
So, and you know that the main character's not particularly complimentary about Harold.
Not a big fan.
Couldn't hit Q's arse with a banjo. And the funny thing about that one, you saw the video at the end of that.
Mm-hmm.
Aye, so
I mean, and I won't spoil it, but yeah.
Oh no, I'll see it, because it's kind of cause it's funny, because I'm not sure if we're actually going to do it again. So, because basically what I said earlier about being a hobby, you get to meet Harold Brattbakk. How good is that? And at the start, I actually contacted him via Facebook, and I sent him a poster, and he sent me back Harold holding the poster. And as the thing went on, and we put the SEC, which was a bit bonkers, and I got a bit more confident in speaking to like ex-Celtic players, and I said, "Look, Harold, would you mind doing this for me?" Right? And I'm thinking, he'll never do this. He'll never do this. And I gave him a wee kind of script, and I asked him, "Do you still have your number 15 top from the day that you stole it?" "Oh yes, I still have that." So I said, "Well, can you maybe do this for me?" So the day this comes back and the video comes through, I'm thinking, he hasn't done it, has he? He's done it. So you open the video up, and it is, and it's like basically, and when you see it in the theatre, it's brilliant, because it's just brilliant in that you see somebody standing there with number 15 is back, and he very slowly turns around, and you see it's Harold Brattbakk, and a big cheer goes up. And my idea basically is, because the main character slags him during the play, this was his chance to get back. And he says, I've got a message for Tam Lyons. It says, you find me a coo's arse, there'll no be a banjo I'll be using. Now, Harry's got no idea what a coo's arse is. He says, because I'll bend like Brattbakk you. And remember, Tam, always keep the faith. And you're thinking, how mad is that? But the point being that this has got a happy ending. And that's what we need. So it has to have a happy ending, and this one has it.
And obviously, so it's just, whether it's the Brattbakk show, the stopping the 10 season, as I say, or Bertie, the 1965 Cup final, which kind of kick-started everything under Jock Stein.
Indeed, yeah.
Two huge times in Celtic history. What inspired you to choose this one, which is, it's fair to say, probably the grimmest time in Celtic history, or modern Celtic history? There's, you've mentioned that there's been longer spells without trophies, but the 90s, for those who lived through it, grim times.
The kids.
So you could have chosen any era. You could have gone for Martin O'Neill's treble season, Brendan Rodgers' Invincible,
4-2,
Gordon Strachan, 3 titles, whatever.
Aye.
So what makes you go for this? Is it a time of life, time of Celtic life that really resonates with you personally? Is that part of it?
I think it was always the play that I was going to write, and the main reason for that is I was there at the time. Brattbakk, I was there at the time. Bertie, I wasn't, so that required a lot of research, and you'd have known that yourself doing the podcast on the Battle of Save Celtic. A lot of research is involved, but I was also involved in a supporters campaign at the time, Save Our Celts at the time. So actually, I got to meet some of the people who were involved at the time, and it is such a one of the the biggest eras in the club's history, because we quite easily went out of business. And it was desperate times. So I had a kind of inside knowledge of that, and I followed it really closely at the time, and I thought it's a story worth telling, I think, but it has to be funny. All these things have to be funny, and I think it does in much the same way as Ben like Brattbakk and Bertie, that they followed really difficult times. We stopped 9 in a row. And when we won the Scottish Cup in 1965, we hadn't won the league in 12 years. So there's a feeling of despondency, and that's the thing about, a number of people who have get back to me and say, I took my son to see Brattbakk, he couldn't believe that. What do you mean Rangers are winning 9 in a row? What do you mean? That's just fantasy, because we've got a generation of Celtic supporters now who only know success. And if we're drawing nothing each at half time with Ross County, people are booing the team. It's just, it's madness. So it'll give people a wee idea of what it was like back in the day, and like all the plays I've done so far, it's told through a Celtic supporting family, and that's the way I've told other stories. So you've got a bit of the letter F appears quite a lot. I don't mean that in a swear word. Well, that does actually. It does as well. But used to be a thing called Sesame Street, talked about. Today's programme is brought to you by the letter F, and F's kind of appeared quite a lot because the plays I've done so far, it didn't start off like this, but it's a kind of, there's a bit of fact, there's a bit of fiction, there's a bit of fantasy in it. And if you've seen Brattbakk, you've seen Bertie, then you know what I'm talking about. I won't say too much about the fantasy part of, and if you know the history, but the fact and the fiction part is, well, here's a fictional family, and they're Celtic diehards, and they've been going to the games forever, and it's the Devon family, Betty Devlin, her teenage son, who's at uni, and her father Joe, who's recently moved in with them. So you're looking at what's been happening from 3 generations then. So you've got a more kind of cross, because what I didn't want to do is have this as a kind of love letter to Fergus McCann, because Fergus has got a lot of critics. Fergus wasn't perfect, and that's another reason for not calling it Ben like the Bunnet, because anyways, so you're looking at that period from 3 points of view. You've got the older guy, Joe, who's coming up for 70. He's been born just after the First World War. He's seen Migrory. He's seen the desperate days of the 50s. He was at Lisbon, whatever. He will never criticise Celtic. Never. You will never criticise Celtic, son. That's what you do. You never do that. And he's behind the Kellys and he's behind the Whites and what have you. And then you've got Michael, 19, is at uni. He's getting no at the View. He's a malcontent. He sees what's happening at Ibrox. Murray spending money. He knows what's happening next. And Betty's in the middle, because she can see, but as those seasons go on, she's veering more towards Michael, thinking, well, Dad, you must be seeing this is no, because what tends to happen, or what's happened in the past, even when things are really bad, a big jock came along, he used to sort of, the next big jock's in the corner, don't panic, and that was the attitude of a lot of people at the time. Don't criticise Celtic. And that's been ingrained in lots of people, understandably so, because if you look at where the Celtic support is mainly from, that the demographic has had struggles, and Celtic is us, so you never criticise your own, so that's...
Can I take you briefly to that? So you've obviously touched on the fact that you were, along with guys like Willie Wilson, part of Save Our Celts, and when you and I covered that on the Battle to Save Celtic, we speak about the time that you and various others handed out flyers at a Celtic Hearts game, I think.
Yeah.
And were roundly told to F off by the majority.
We back in Ibrox.
How dare you criticise Celtic at the time?
Aye. So you do have two sides to every story, and again within the play I've tried to strike that kind of balance, because it wasn't all one way. And then we'll touch on things like, for those who haven't watched the excellent podcast, The Battle to Save Celtic, Brian Dempsey is a central figure and all that. And in my humble opinion, if Brian Dempsey wasn't involved, I think it'd be a different outcome, because he was the guy, that made a lot of things happen, who pulled a lot of people together. And again, a lot of people are no big fans of Brian Dempsey, but you can't underestimate what he did at the time. And I think when he was removed from the board, so for younger listeners, he joined the board in April 1990, along with Michael Kelly, who was an ex-Lord Provost of Glasgow. Michael Kelly was part of the Kelly dynasty. And then 6 months later, his appointment was going to be ratified by the board. And Michael Kelly and Chris White, who was the major shareholder at the time, managed to get enough shares and didn't bring one to the board. So that was a major embarrassment to Brian Dempsey. And that's how the first act in the play finishes. And one of the characters is saying, I picked the wrong man to fuck with, So that's... And then what happens in the second act is all the things that happen from maybe early 91 through to the sheer issue. And yes, the Save Our Celts thing, we had a couple of public meetings. Brian Dempsey came along to one of them. Terry Cassidy, who was the chief executive that the board appointed after they get rid of Brian Dempsey, he came along as well. So there's a number of stories and a number of personalities and a number of key matches, because the thing about most Celtic fans at the time, understandably, were only concerned with what's happening on the park. And I think what we've found over the last, certainly 30 years, as social media has become a bigger thing, fans are more aware of what's happening off the pitch. 30 years ago, you wouldn't know who the finance director was, or the commercial manager was, maybe not even the chief executive, because you didn't have one, or who the directors were. So the supporters are a lot more informed these days, and basically the Celtic board were kind of running Celtic on their own and kind of running them down, basically. And they didn't have, with the best will in the world, they were dyed in the wool Celtic men. You couldn't argue with that. But were they the best people to take Celtic forward at the time, particularly across the city, when they've got David Murray spending silly money on a team? We don't have the money. And then in January 1990, the Taylor report comes out following the Hillsborough disaster that says everyone needs to have an all-seated stadium. And Rangers have that, and we don't have that. So add that to the problem. It's not the fact that we're skint. We can't compete with them. We need to build a stadium. How much is that going to cost? Tens of millions. Are these the guys that are going to build the stadium? I don't think so. So they're scrambling about. They don't really have... these are not captains of industry. These are not businessmen. These are well-intentioned Celtic supporters. And that you can't argue with. And that's the point old Joe's making all the time. Basically, these are Celtic men. They are Celtic men. But the world was changing. And it was felt that I don't think these guys can react to that. And if we leave this too long, we're going to be in trouble. And the funny thing that's the last word. The interesting thing looking back was that the Save Our Celts idea was, it basically followed the Dempsey sacking. It was like, there's lots of things we need to do here. You've brought this guy onto the board who was going to solve the stadium problem, because that's where his expertise lied. And he talked about he had some land in Rob Royston, and Celtic had the first option on that land. Now, if you sit back and you know nothing about this, you think, that's good. That's solved. But then on the opposite side of the fence, people would say, oh, it's not that clear cut. You'll need to divert roads and you need to do this and you need to do that. And then there's a suspicion, well, what's in it for him? Is he going to make money? So again, that's old Joe's point of view that, whereas a young guy saying, no, we need to do this. No, we don't. And Bertie's in the middle thinking, I can see, who knows what the answer is? Because everything you do is a risk. So you don't know.
Yeah. So take us to the start of the play, Jim. So you've mentioned it starts post-Centenary season. We've just picked up a glorious league and Scottish Cup double under Billy McNeill. All things on some scale look to be rosy, but if you dig a bit deeper, as you say, you realise things are far from that. So what's going on with the Devlin family and Celtic in general when the story begins?
So it's not we've just won the double. Big Billy's come back, and because the season before that, Davy Hayes, the manager, and at Christmas time, we're something like 9 points clear. And this was Graham Souness's first season. He's spending big money, but we're 9 points clear. And Davy Hay goes to the board and said, I need to buy a couple of players. I'm after Stevie Clark, in the topical. I'm after Stevie Clark, excuse me, who was a right back at St Mirren, and a guy called Joe McLaughlin, centre half in Morton, two Celtic fans. And the board said, if you want to buy them, use your own money, infamous quote, and we're going to lose the league. Now you buy these two players because Celtic have always not been very well known for having good defences. You buy a couple of good quality defenders who were at that time good quality defenders, chances are you win the league. So that's a major own goal. So they sack Davy Hay. Right. So they take no responsibility, they take no accountability, and they meet Billy Mayo in that car park in Clydebank, all dead underhand stuff, unprofessional stuff, even though they're Celtic men at heart. Big Billy comes in. Who can argue with Billy Mayo coming back? No one. They're still spending fortunes across the city. But we won the double in an absolute canter, playing brilliant football, last minute goals. Were you young enough to see the double team?
Yes.
Brilliant.
Centenary team, yeah.
I keep checking these things with young Tino.
Born in 81.
There you go. So you're 7. Goodness sake. Sorry, kids these days. So, magical season. People still talk about the double season just now. To this day, the players are lauded. McAvenny, the Maestro, Big Roy. Brilliant. So, everything in the garden is rosy. The young guy's still moaning. He's concerned, no, behind the scenes, and they'll get up on the double, they'll be so daft. And then the next season's a disaster. Although we won the cup with Joe Miller. And then the next season's even worse. 89-90 is a bit of a low point, because we were chatting about that a few weeks ago when I sent you all the stats. We were fifth.
Mm-hmm.
We were fifth. We played something like 36 games and scored 36 goals. With 36 goals against, and we were something like, with the same points as the 6th and 7th team, and we're something like 5 points off second bottom.
I mentioned to you my first Celtic hero, Jackie Jakanowski at the time. Does he feature in the play? Does he not make an appearance?
He might get mentioned in a derogatory manner, but it'd be just a throwaway, I think.
What did you describe his time as? A baptism of mediocrity?
A baptism of mediocrity, aye. He was... that should have been Maurice Johnson. That was who we got because we couldn't get Maurice Johnson, which obviously features in the play. But getting back to the 88, so everything's going to be great. And then we go to Ibrox in the first Old Firm game of the season, as it was called by then, before people started complaining. And we get humped 5-1. And that set the standard for that season. We humped 4-1 at Ibrox in the New Year's game. And so it wasn't very good. And Joe saved the day and stopped him doing a treble. And then so the Devlins are back and they're celebrating, and old Joe's can say, now we've treble, and the young guys go, is that us? Is that where we are now? You know, European Cup winners 20 years ago. Now all we're doing is trying to be a treble. Oh, come on, son, you. So the youngin knows what's happening. The old is on the wee Joe. So then you go to the following season into like 89-90, and Brian Dempsey, Michael Kelly joined the board. We lose in the cup final on penalties. Antoine misses the penalty. We get knocked at the League Cup final. League Cup at the semi-final stage. It's a barren season. We've won nothing. It's kind of rubbish. So they've won, 89-90. They've won 2 in a row at that point. And nobody's talking about in a row. They just won the league for the past 2 seasons. Mm-hmm. So then Dempsey's on the board, and then Dempsey's off the board. Right? And at that point, people like myself were thinking, this isn't right. And I'd heard a guy on Clyde come on and said, I'm going to start a campaign. And I thought, I'll contact him. And I contact him. And And we get this wee campaign, for want of a better word, to try and raise awareness that things aren't too good. But they've only won 2 in a row. Like, it's only 2 in a row. And that's what you'll get, because the point you made there is we thought, well, we'll try and gauge opinion. How do you do that? Because this is pre-social media. This is end of 1990, start of 1991. You get leaflets done and you hand out leaflets and you say, look, save ourselves. We're not too happy with what's going on just now. If we don't watch it, we're going to be in big trouble. Dempsey getting bumped off the board, that's a bad thing. What do you think? Because if he's interested in doing something, well, can I get something together? And as you alluded to, half the people, you're off. You want about? You're off. Sell it. And we organised this sort of public meeting, and Dempsey came along, and Jim Craig came along, and Wally Wilson, who's the guy who started the Save Ourselves campaign, Jed Dunbar, what have you, all came along. So that kind of raised awareness of that. So the family are at that meeting. In fact, the young guy gets involved in the campaign, basically. So that's kind of happening. And then as you go on, there's wee high points, and the wee high points are on the field. There's a famous the week in March in 1991 where we beat Rangers twice in the 1 week, and one of the games happened in St Patrick's Day, and it was called the St Patrick's Day Massacre. 1-3, yeah. St Patrick's Day Massacre. And again, if you're a Celtic fan, if you're old Joe in this play, that's sent back in their box. So that's it. That's us. But then they won 3 in a row. So
was there more old Joes than not? So Joe won't hear a word against the Kellys and the Whites. At that time, you've lived through it, Jim, is, I don't know, 95% of Celtic's fan base, in your opinion, like that?
No, I wouldn't say as much as that, but maybe 70-30.
Yeah,
I think mainly amongst, like, I'm not that I would know this because I don't speak to everyone, but the gut feel would be that the older fans are pretty much give it time, it will sort itself out. Because there is a perception, it's almost like the circle of life. They win a few leagues, we win a few leagues. They win a few leagues, we win a few leagues. But the financial position, that just changed everything. Because if you go back to the 60s, and I think I've said a number of times, for me, there's only really been one 9 in a row that I recognised as on merit, and that was Jock Stein's 9 in a row. Because if you go back to the 60s and the early 70s, most of the players and most of the teams were on similar wages. They were getting big, Hibs were getting big crowds, Hearts were getting big crowds. That was really, really tough. Whereas when Rangers won the league in the late 80s, and when Celtic won the league recently, 9 in a row, they were bought. They were the most, I'm not saying they're not good things they have done, and they're not big achievements, but those two teams in those two eras had the most money by miles. And that's when you go back to the time of the play that we're skint. We've got no money. We can't even get second place. So the team with the most money tends to win more often than not. And if you've got significantly more money than the other team, you're in trouble. Which gives me confidence going back to the current day that goodness knows how much money we have got in the bank this season once the Champions League money starts coming in. It's silly money when you compare it to, as I said, going back to that time where we'd virtually nothing in the bank. We didn't have a bank overdraft at that point in time. We went to overdraft after the Centenary season because the board built the new kind of front facade, then it went into debt, and then kept in debt. And as that position get worse and worse and worse, and then over here you've got a new stadium you need to build. As I said, from a kind of, if you take the emotion at the whole thing, it's a small business that's been run pretty badly, and you know how this is going to end, and it's not going to end particularly well. Where are we? 91. So you've got 91, we beat them on the park twice. This is great. And then they win the league, and that's 3 in a row. And Big Billy gets sacked. And we bring Liam Brady in. Now you're thinking, as I thought at the time, what? What? We didn't need a Liam Brady. We needed somebody who was a tried and trusted manager who would sort things out. Because what you don't want to bring in is somebody who, if we've been financially out-muscled over there, we need somebody who can, who knows exactly what he's doing. And I think it was perceived, well, they get Souness, so we'll get Liam Brady. But they were throwing money at Souness, and we couldn't throw money at Liam Brady.
Liam Brady had never managed in his life up to that point.
The fact that he played for Ireland, and I mean, he was a superb player, don't get me wrong, he was an absolutely genius player.
Crazy appointment though.
But so I think he was in for it, Stapleton was in for it as well. Ivan Glolik was in for it, and the fourth person escapes me. Maybe it was me, I don't know. So just Mad appointment, and that's going to end in tears. But they did throw some money at it, and they spent the guts of about $5 million on Tony Cascarino, Gary Gillespie, Stuart Slater,
Martin Hayes, these kind of guys.
Why? When we needed, for want of a better word, good Celtic men, people who knew what was at stake. That was a time for that. Now's not the time for that. Football's moved on; it's more sophisticated now. But that was a time when we needed more of the Roy Aitken types, and Roy Aitken had left by then. We'd lost Roy, and we lost Tommy, and they died in the real Celtic men, and that had made a difference. So, and you felt sorry for the maestro because he's having to carry the team in his back. And in terms of levels of class, he's away up here somewhere, and then John Collins was there. So it's the two of them, and then there's not much in between that, and they're spending silly money. So we're throwing money at it. We're into debt, 3 million, 4 million, 5 million in debt. We have no idea how we're going to pay that money back until it works out, and we need to build this stadium, and they don't really know what they're doing. And they've got Terry Cassidy, who's a bit of a kind of bull in a china shop kind of guy, about like Charles Green for those who have never heard of Terry Cassidy. And he was in there, and he was winding everyone else up. He was winding Dempsey up, and you need to prove yourself to me. What? Dempsey's got an executive box. Dempsey's thrown advertising revenue, and here's the chief executive of Celtic noising them up, basically.
Terry Cassidy came to one of your meetings today.
He came to the second one. So that first one was in February, and then we managed to get him along. I don't know how we managed to do this in the December, because he's been quite dismissive, because he was saying, well, these aren't really Celtic fans, and they've been anti the board. He was an old Joe. That was basically where he was coming from. But fair play to him, and hats off to him. He came along to that meeting, and he took all the questions, and he's a bit of a kind of pantomime villain at times, but you couldn't argue with a lot of things he was saying. And we were having a wee chat before we came on today about mainstream media, and people in the meeting would say things, and it was more a Q&A. We had the first one we had, it was about Dempsey saying, look, we need you all pull together, guys. This is good. With Joe Beltrami, a very famous Glasgow lawyer, he's been a Celtic fan since the 50s, and we need to do this. Jim Craig spoke, Lisbon Line. That meeting was all about people saying, look guys, not too clever. And Brian Dempsey managed to get a couple of the board members to come along, Jimmy Farrow and Tom Grant, who were kind of on his side, to listen. And in fact, in the Celtic View, that was the front page headline in the Celtic View, Tom Grant says, these are real fans. So you thought, well, that's no bad, that's actually going the right way. But then Cassidy came in, and it was all Dempsey's not a Celtic fan, save ourselves, they're not Celtic fans, whatever. So to get him to come along was marvellous, and he took the opportunity to say some things which actually the Celtic fans were in agreement with him. So somebody would say something like, I've heard this is happening, and he'll say, well, where did you hear that? I read it in the Daily Record. And he'll say, well, do you think everything that's in the Daily Record is true? Silence, and that's something that I think, again, if you're an old Joe, again, you'll be saying they're out to do us, the papers are out to do us, and they were, and you can't deny that, and that gets through to when even Fergus took over, the whole kind of Saddam Hussein thing, again, for younger listeners, there was a kind of picture of Saddam in the scene, and Fergus McCann, and some like one of these as a megalomaniac dictator, the other one Saddam Hussein. So it's a kind of, they were out to get him, and when Fergus got booed in Flag Day, that came from the mainstream media. That was painting the guy, he's the guy that drove Wim Jansen away. So if you go back 30 years when social media wasn't a thing, so you were dependent on the Daily Records and the other kind of tabloids, because you know other information. Apart from when Not The View came along in the mid-80s, and Not The View was set up by the brilliant Jerry Dunbar as a kind of counterbalance to the Celtic View, which is kind of pretty much viewed as the board's mouthpiece. There'd be no criticism of the board. Pravda, Russian Pravda. So even if things were terrible, the board would sugarcoat it. It's not that bad. Don't be daft. And that appealed to the old Joes of this world. That, like, Celtic View says, if it's all right, what do you mean? And the boys get the Celtic View saying, well, look, and not the View saying, well, look, this is happening. They've got that. They're doing this. We're not doing this. He's leaving, and whatever. So Terry Cassidy came along, and he was great, to give him his due. Played the pantomime villain, but did make a lot of good points. But what happened with the first meeting that we had, it was all over the papers the next day. It was on a Sunday, and then Monday it was front page news. Bizarrely, we'd organised this, but we thought it was just me meeting. And then the next day it's a picture of Dempsey, giving all this kind of stuff. And it was the kind of front, or the first piece on Scotland Today, BBC Scotland. And you're thinking, this is interesting, the fact that people that invested in this. And the journalists at the time were all great. Your guys like James Traynor was brilliant. And people say, what? James, he was brilliant. Hugh Keevins, brilliant at the time. So we then do the Terry Cassidy one, and that gets the same traction as well. But the thing he said at the meeting that was all over the place, all over every place, was that this was like December 1991, and the deadline for having an all-seated stadium was August 1994. So we didn't have a lot of time. And he said, within 2 years, we'll have the best stadium in Europe, which was the quote. So that's the headline, which was a kind of nonsensical thing to say.
Yeah.
Even if he said, we'll have an all-seated stadium in 2 years, you would severely doubt that. Because at the time, obviously, the board were doing their best. And again, their best wouldn't be good enough because that's not their skill set, and that's understandable. And there was talk of Cambus Lang, and that was like a mini Chernobyl at the time. There was methane gas that was built in mine works. They would have to build new roads and stuff like that. And that made Rob Royson look like a shoe-in. We start comparing. And they were doing feasibility studies, and they were considering different options, one of which was Linwood. Just, what? What do you mean?
Yeah.
And there's one at the top of High Street and stuff. So basically, there's all this stuff going on, and that's the point I was making. You're looking at 7 years worth of stuff. So what's in and what's out? And that was hard. And you have to make it funny as much as you can. So the likes of the kind of, they go to see the Shettleston meeting and they see Brian Dempsey, and they're talking about the latest game or something like that, and then Betty turns around to Joe and says, but you must admit that Brian Dempsey was really impressive. We say, no, you must admit that. And he says, that's a lovely man. He would give you the scales off his back. Fucking snake oil salesman. So that was the kind of the view of this here and the view of that over there. And then even if it goes on, old Joe Disney Merlo, and you get to the boycott game. Maybe I'm jumping too far ahead here, but so things steadily get worse. We're never going to win the league. Never going to win the league. And people talked, and when they got to maybe 4 or 5 in a row, you start to think, they could do 9. They could do, in fact, they could do any number they wanted to. And we were completely powerless. And that's the thing. And because it's Celtic, and because of the emotion that's behind it, and because we all have a Celtic state of mind, there's a podcast, that you're all invested in this, and you're completely powerless. You are completely powerless. There's nothing you can do. And what then started to happen was there was a kind of unofficial boycott then. I stopped going. After Dempsey was booked, I'd had a season ticket, and then that season I said, that's me. I'm not going to Celtic Park. I'm not giving them money until they're out. I went to a few away games. I went to games at Hampden, but I didn't get back. And what we couldn't do, we could never call for a boycott, because at the end of the day, who are you to tell us that? Yeah. Never mind the old Joes saying that, anyone saying that. If I had to turn around to you next week to you and say, I think you should boycott this early, you'd be thinking, are you mad?
Whatever you say, James.
Are you mad? So you could never say that, but there was a kind of unofficial boycott happening where less and less people were going. And that's the thing when you talk about, I'm going to say young people, but anyone under the age of 40, 45 has little idea of what it was like going to football back in those days, before all-seated stadium, before season tickets, before all that. How football worked is people went to football on a whim. So you could be, going to watch Celtic play Aberdeen, and you're sitting in a pub with your pal at 1:30, and another pal wanders in and says, who's Celtic playing today? Aberdeen. Aye, I'll go with you.
Yeah.
And jumps in the car, and off you go. And there's kids getting lifted over for nothing. So it was a completely different, and obviously the facilities were archaic. It was a death trap. That led to Hillsborough, very sadly, conditions like that. So it was a different way of life. And what then happened was that in those seasons where things started to go bad, attendance started to tail off then. So, and people talk about, it's phenomenal what's happening just now. 60,000 people every home game, 50-odd thousand season ticket holders. You say that to somebody 30 years ago, that's science fiction. And that's with Ferguson division.
Yeah, because
at
even
the time,
he's building the stadium and they're saying, right, we'll make it 30, 40,000. He's saying, well, hold on a minute. And I think there was a bit of economies of scale at the time. It wasn't that much more to make it 40,000 to 50,000 and then further to 60. And he thought, we can, Field of Dreams, build it, they will come.
They will come, and that's the vision thing, and that's where, as I said, Fergus at the time certainly divided opinion. Maybe that more people are looking, but and there's other things like the amount of money that Fergus made. It sticks in people's craw as well, in terms of that. But hey ho, is what it is. But at the time, we were getting crowds. Good crowds were like 30, 40,000. That was a good crowd. And then if we were putting Rangers, maybe 50, 60,000. Right? But when you start to have a bad season, and there was only 6,000 season ticket holders back, I think 4 was in the stand and 2 were in the ground. Because there's no incentive to buy a season ticket. Why would you bother? Because what I did before I got a season ticket, most home games, I would rock up at 2:30 and go to the stand, which is now the South Stand, sitting down, sitting down. And you would get a decent seat at 2:30, most games. And what changed that was the Dundee game, when we won the league, which is this infamous game whereby they gave the attendances like 60,000 and there was at least 80,000 in the ground. And it was a death trap that day, an absolute death trap, where we thought, maybe go at 2, because it might be busy today, because we have a chance of winning the league, clinching the league today. And we turned up at 2 o'clock and we ended up sitting at the very back row of the stand at 2 o'clock, which was, people are standing in aisles, and you look across to the jungle and there's people spilling onto the track, and it was madness. And that's when I decided I think we should get a season ticket, because we'll get a guaranteed seat then. And that's what we did the following season. So what tended to happen then is that at the start of every season, like we've done today, the fixtures are out, we're all dead excited, brilliant, come on, look at home, this is good, da-di-da-di-da. Even the most depressed Celtic fan back then, it's a new season, and with every new season comes hope. We'll sort them this season. This is our
fresh
turn.
Wave of optimism.
We've bought all these great new signings who are not really good, which we then get to know over the next months or so. We'll do them this season. They're not as good as we think they are. And then you fast forward to January and the league's over again. And then what then happens is those 40, 30,000 becomes 25,000, 22,000. So it's also a kind of double-edged sword, that there's no success there and there's less money coming in, which makes it more difficult for the board to do anything. So it's kind of self-fulfilling. That becomes more difficult. And all the time, what are you doing at the stadium?
Yeah.
Nothing's happening. And they're feeding lines about, as I said, maybe canvas lying, maybe this. And this guy came with this super idea about building this stadium. You didn't have to pay a penny, because you would sell debentures and you would have American football matches on it and you would hockey on it. And you're thinking, are you mad? Are you mad? But then there's Kevin Kelly standing in a field showing you pictures and you're thinking, you are mad. You are mad. And then you're thinking, well, I can't be the only one who's thinking you're mad. There's thousands of us think you're mad, but no enough yet to think you're mad. And as you go in and it's 3 in a row and then it's 4 in a row. And one of the things that happened back, if you go back, you mentioned Jackie Jakanowski, is that we got him because we didn't get Mo Johnson. And I've watched your excellent series again, and Peter Grant in particular shares my opinion that the Morris Johnson one was pivotal, because I believe, even though we weren't very good, if we'd assigned Morris Johnson in '89, we won the league the following year. And we stopped them in their tracks at that point in time, because Morris Johnson was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And the word and suit was that Charlie Nick was coming back. A Celtic team with Charlie Nicholas and Morris Johnson up front. There's 60 goals in the season guaranteed. Obviously, Charlie Nick joined the season after and he was a bit past his best by then. But not to get Morris Johnson was huge. And then for him to rock up over there was just, that's massive. That's absolutely massive. That's them saying to you, we can just wander in there and take any player we want. And Morris Johnson, he was such a symbol of that. Be different if they walked in and signed Jakanowski from it. You think, well, all right, Jakanowski. But to get somebody like Morris Johnson, who died, who I still believes that died a real Celtic fan, he did what he did. To do that was such a statement of intent from them. And we just sat back helpless. When in fact, according to UEFA, we were in the right. And if our board had been doing their job and forced it through, and even if he was an unhappy player, we'd have kept Morris Johnson. Well, keep him in and sell him to somebody else or something. But anyway, do it. But not to have done that had severe ramifications. I
was going to say the Mo Johnson situation maybe kind of sums up everything, in terms, you know, in a microcosm in terms of just how shambolic everything was on and off the park. So obviously there's the Mo Johnson situation, 89, Brian Dempsey getting ousted in 1990, yourself and the guys start the meeting through Save Our Celts 1991, and so on and so forth. There's so much going on off the park.
Yeah.
On the park, as you say, there's the odd glimmer of hope, there's the odd win over Rangers, there's different things going on, but by and large we're useless, and that's just the way that's going. So the Devlin family, you know, and Joe is the grandfather, he's, despite all of this, he's saying it'll all be fine, you know, football's cyclical, you know, it'll be our turn soon. But there's another character in the play, Tam, I believe,
and
he's keeping the Devlins up to date with various things off the park, and he thinks there's another way to save Celtic's future.
Yeah, well, the other mystery character, a guy called Tam, played by the excellent Jerry Taylor, who unfortunately couldn't make it today. Funny man. So basically, Tam is right up the middle of what's happening. So he knows Brian Dempsey, he knows David Lowe, he knows Jim Doherty, who's in Canada, he knows the board, he knows everyone, but he's fictitious. Basically, he's not a real person. But because he knows all these people, he knows what's happening, and he meets the Devlins by chance and gets to know them. So he turns up, and then when something happens, and this is the point of it, trying to tell the story, that the Devlins don't know what's happening, because they're like, if the other Celtic fan, they're thinking what's happening, but he knows what's happening. And again, you've interviewed people like David Lowe. So David Lowe's out there starting to kind of like hoover up shares, because David Lowe's plans is brilliant. There's all these disaffected minor Celtic shareholders out there, and Celtic have no idea who they are, but David Lowe does. So he's out there and he's buying all these shares up, and Dempsey's in there helping him, and one or two others, I think John Keane's in there. They're all so-called rebels in inverted commas, because they're rebel against the board. So that's the plan. They don't know we're doing this. Let's get all the shares together, and at some point we get more than 50%. We vote them off and we save the day, and everyone's happy. But then Celtic get wind of this, and then they start taking some action to stop them doing this. And then I think the most they got was about 40%. So if you get 40%, you can be a nuisance. You can call for extraordinary general meetings. You can make them do this and make them do that. And there was a few events where they embarrassed the Celtic board by doing certain things, and people couldn't attend meetings because they hadn't the right paperwork and all this kind of stuff. So they're a bit of a thorn in the board's side, but ultimately they couldn't effect change. So that was quite frustrating. So the Tam character, he knows this is happening because he's involved in this stuff. Again, he's a fictitious character. So things like, you know, when it was a Friday night, Brian Dempsey was kicked off the board, and it's on Scott Sport. So the family's watching Scott Sport, and then there's a knock at the door, and it's Tam. Oh, fucking day I've had. Oh, just back from the park. See that? See, they've done, and I've seen Dempsey's fizzing off. You know, so what happens next time? Tam says, what Dempsey's going to do? What we need is a supporters campaign. Son, you can, you know, so, and he'll come back and forward, and he'll kind of keep them up to date, and things like, you then, it goes on and on, so you get to something like late 93, and then you've got Matt Maloney and the Celts for Change guys come in, and then they've got a campaign which is really, really successful, doing some brilliant stunts, getting things noticed, and then it kind of culminates in the crowds are going down and down and down, and by that point we're in towards the end of 94, end of the season 94, so 89, 99, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's 5 in a row, right? And even Celts for Change were wary of calling for a boycott after, you know, 5 in a row, but they were very clever in what they did. They spent a lot of time canvassing opinion. They went to Ireland, spoke to a lot of supporter clubs, and they all backed them up, and they decided, let's have an official boycott. And by that point, the bank are getting twitchy anyway. The bank owed a lot of money. The overdraft limit is about to be hit. The board are not willing to give them any money, even though they're giving a lot of money to the team across the city. Things are pretty bad. And then there's a game against Kilmarnock. A game get postponed and then played in a midweek. And I think the idea was that if there was less than 10,000 at the game, the Chancellor of the bank would step in and do something. Do what? Don't know. But they'd be forced to do something, you know. And then Matt and the guy had employed canvassers, counters in every turnstile. Because what used to happen, again, for the kids out there, was that because there was no such thing as computerised turnstiles, no such thing as computers back then, that attendances were pretty much anything you want to make them. And all clubs did this, whereby because it's cash, there was the official attendance 32,422. It'd be exact as if they actually knew who was there, when in fact there was maybe over 50,000 in the ground. So all clubs did that. So, but this was the one game the board will want to have more people there to get over this 10,000. I think the break-even point was about 28,000. So if Celtic go under 28,000 at a match, they've lost money, and they've got a massive overdraft, and they're losing money. And they need to build a stadium. So this isn't any good. So Matt and the guys have got canvas up there counting people. And the play, again, you back to Josie, it's cool, and he wants to go to the game. We can't go to the game. What if we leave at half time? No, we can't go to the game. Michael's told you, we can't go to the game. But what if we just go and we can't? And then Tam visits him afterwards, it's all aye. And it ends up something like, I can't remember the numbers, 8,000 something or other as the official vote that Matt and the guys have got from this. And then the bank then say, enough's enough. And then they step in and they say, well, we want some money from £1 million by a certain date, and John Keane steps in, who sadly passed away last week, and then things start to happen. But before we got to that bit, I think back in '88, Ferguson actually went to the board himself and offered to deal with the marketing, and offered them a loan, and they chased him basically. So I think he came back once or twice, but I think Fergus being Fergus, I think, well, that's me, I've done it. If you don't want my money, then beats it. But I think it was Brian Dempsey, when things started to, this buying the shares and that's not working, what are we going to do next? I think it was Brian that contacted Fergus McCann and David Lowe as well. And they formed a kind of coalition, if you want to call it rebels, whatever. If my understanding is they actually never got on, but the goal was, how can we save Celtic? And they were working towards that end. So Fergus was there and thereabouts. And there was a couple of TV programmes at the time, at BBC, I can't remember what it was called, but kind of a Power Play at Paradise, something like that. And Fergus was interviewed amongst a lot of other people, including the guy who was going to build this stadium for nothing. And it was just like fantasy. Are you serious? And Fergus was on, and again, I like Fergus because he's straight to the point and he doesn't mess about with stuff like that. And he was talking about the two most important people here are the bank, because by that point Celtic had given security of the stadium to the bank, and he says, well, number one is the bank, because the bank control all the club's assets, and secondly is the supporters, because the supporters control all their cash. And these two entities, they're the guys that have to be happy, and they're not happy at the moment. So, and he had his plan. He was going to come in and put a lot of his own money in, have a share issue, get some bank overdraft. So they'd be happy to give him money at that if he's throwing money in. And that was the kind of general plan. But again, you're then, as I said, you come to 5 in a row, you have that boycott, the bank step in, and very quickly Fergus comes over from Canada and meets up with Dempsey, and they go to the bank and they give them sorted out, and you've got the famous, the game is over, the Rebels have won on the steps. And then a few months after that, and then we end up going to Hampden for that season, because we could get steel. Topical gag. And a few months after that we have the share issue. And if the Devlins, imagine getting the chance to buy shares in Celtic. That's, in old Joe's lifetime, you would never have had that opportunity to do something like that. So it was oversubscribed. They hoped to raise 5 million, they raised 9 million. It was the most successful share issue of a football club. Fergus had the vision to do that, and there's a quote from Fergus talking about when he saw the line of people lined around the stadium, it suddenly dawned on him, I'm responsible for their money. And that's why, he gets a bit of a reputation being quite a tight-fisted guy, but he would always come back with that. He says, no, my money, it's the fans' money.
You mentioned, Jim, just to go back on something, that there's some fans still to this day not quite happy that so the figures are that Fergus invested initially something like 9 million and left with 40.
Yeah.
Just from my point of view, I've got no issue with that at all, right? In my opinion, he came in, he saved Celtic, he said he would do certain things, he would build a stadium, he would create a fan ownership type model, and he'd sail off into the sunset, and he'd done exactly that within the 5-year time. And whether he made 31 million profit or 100 million, I couldn't care less. He's done what he's done, and people will go against the capitalist side of all of that. But where do you stand on that? Are you okay with it? Do you have an issue with that?
I can understand why people are a bit concerned about that because of the amounts, but like you,
I'd be more concerned if he hadn't done it.
Well, that's the point he makes. He said anyone who bought shares would have had the same return. Because if you bought £900 worth of shares, you get away with £4,000 or whatever, you know. So that's so. And as I said, he said, "Would you rather I'd have lost money?" I think at the time, I think he'd said something like, "If I made £1 million, I'd be happy with that." That's a story I'd read somewhere. I don't know if that's true or not. And in the play, Tam goes to see him, and it's Tam that convinces him, basically, you know. And one of the things, Tam, you don't actually see Fergus as his voice because he doesn't want to see anyone. And Tam saying to him, "So you chip in 9 million," and Fergus said, "What? What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you must be worth about what, 14, 15 million. So 9's nothing. Well, that's very generous of you." So he's kind of So apparently Fergus is worth about 15 million, say, at the time. So 9 million's near enough 2/3 of his fortune. And if you said to some ordinary person like you or I, "What's all your assets worth? X." Do you want to throw 2/3 of that into a football club who are a mess, who need to build a stadium? And that's why I kind of looking across the city, you know, and there's people talking about, you let your club die or whatever. They were never savable because of the tax, because of the tens of millions of pounds that were there. Celtic were always savable. You know, it wouldn't have cost a lot of money to save Celtic. It was the barriers that the board put up, and they were still putting the barriers up until the bank said, enough's enough. The barriers come down, the investment comes in. And you've interviewed a number of people, and if it wasn't Fergus, it'd have been somebody else. It would have been a Willie Hawke, a Gerald Wisefield, maybe even a John Keane. Somebody would have stepped in, because it was about getting control. And once you've got control, and you've got people with the skill sets that they don't have, that have the vision that says, you know what, all we need to do is tap into this, tap into that. Because there was lots of Celtic fans out there who had serious money, but the board chased them because they didn't want to dilute any of their power. Now, again, if you play devil's advocate, what if you were in their shoes? What if you were the Kevin Kelly whose grandfather was in at the start of the club and he's left you his shares, and you're thinking, I don't want to get rid of these. But the actions that they took were detrimental to the board. So you can try to play devil's advocate. They left it too late. I mean, they could have in 1988 said, you know what, we'll give up half our shares here. We'll bring in these smart cookies and we'll all benefit from this. Because as the old phrase says, half of nothing is nothing. And that's where they ended up. Well, they made some money from their shares. But if they'd done that, and Fergus came in 88 and did all the things he was thinking of doing, and only took half the shares, or took 51% of the shares, and they all benefited from that, they'd all be still there just now. You'd have the Kellys and the Whites and the Grants, they'd all be still there in the 60,000 stadium. There's never been a 9 in a row over there, you know. So we were chatting earlier about wee moments that spark things that lead to something else, If that had happened, if Mo Johnson had happened, if this, history's changed. But it didn't, and it ended up the way, and that's when it says, and if you know the history, question mark. And the question mark is because there's a wee spin in things. Tam being the perfect example, because Tam doesn't exist. But how do you tell the story unless you know what's happening? And you, like me, as I said before, that if we had this conversation 9 months ago, the chances are I'd be saying a lot of things you'd never heard before, but you know all this stuff because you've researched all the things. So in 90 minutes, you need to tell all the stories, hit all the major points. And how do you do that? Well, we need somebody who actually knows what's happening. But you can't have... Because one of the ideas I had at the start about Bendel at the bunnet, I was going to do it, I thought, make it about Fergus McCann. So it's like Fergus McCann's in the play, it's about his play. And he's doing all this stuff, and he's meeting Cadet, and he's meeting Van Hooydonk, and now you're bubbling away thinking, oh, that'll be funny, and this will be funny. And then I was talking to somebody, I mean, I've spent a lot of the last 5 years with Des McLean, who's the funniest man in the world, and he can impersonate anyone in the world. And I find myself lapsing into horrible impersonations of people because Des is Bertie old sort of thing. You know better than me, son. So anyway, I was a bit old. So chatting to some guy, and he says something like, oh, that'd be really funny. So Fergus play. And then he did a terrible impersonation of Fergus McCann that sounded like Groucho Marx. And I thought, well, that'd be really funny. Imagine somebody playing Fergus Marx but as Groucho, playing Fergus but as Groucho Marx. Would the long coat and the cigar and stuff like that. So he's meeting Cadet and he's talking to Michael Kelly and Dempsey, and you're thinking, oh, nah, that's a kind of one joke thing. That's basically, so it kind of evolved from, I need to move away from Fergus altogether. I need to tell the story. It needs to be, again, the family thing. Here's a fictitious family, and they're telling a story about being a Celtic fan, again, with the F. Here's a factual story over here. The facts behind, as you've called it, the battle to save Celtic, and everything. And it's a football thing, again. And it's got the fantasy thing, which I'm not going to talk about because that's the big surprise within it. And also, I do is, before we meet the Devlins, we have a wee scene about the start of the club, how the club first started. And then the last scene, or after Fergus's share issue, we then talk about what happened from then until when Fergus left, that wee bit at the end. So I kind of bookend, but the story is, it's a family of Celtic fans going through absolute grief for the guts of 7 seasons until there's a bit of light at the end of the tunnel, and that light at the end of the tunnel is at the takeover. And within the poster that I've put, I mean, that's the only concession I made to Fergus, that it's a photograph of the old stadium where they're almost like looking for the bat signal, but it's a bunnet instead. But it's not about Fergus McCann, as I said. It's more that it's about that story, and them telling that story. So that's and if you know the history, question mark.
And it is a great story, and you know, if we hadn't lived it and you were a wee bit older than me at the time, Jim, you know, it's something that we've all been through. And if someone then told you, or even told some of the young folks today, here's what happened at Celtic not all that long ago, people would find it hard to believe. You know, it's truth is stranger than fiction at times.
It's all rubbish, basically.
And, you know, we've covered a lot of the ins and outs, as I say, the on-field stuff, the off-field stuff. There's so much going on, and there's a few, you know, the way the play culminates and stuff, which we'll not spoil for now. But I'm really looking forward to seeing it, Jim. You're back at Webster's Theatre. I know you've done some stuff there before. When is the play, and how can folks get tickets?
It's on October the 10th to the 12th, and tickets can be available from the Webster's website, and I continue to post stuff in X, as it's now called, so then the links are always on there as well. I'm also on Facebook under Jim Orr.
And you're on Twitter/X at Brattbakk Jim Orr. Is that right?
Brattbakk Jim Orr, that's me. That's my name because I'm Harold's best pal. That's how it works.
Jim, just as we start to close things out, any final thoughts either on the play or just what was very genuinely a pretty crazy time in Celtic history?
It was a crazy time, and it's amazing to look back. I think one of the things you said at the start was the number of trophies that we've won in the last 24 years. You could never ever conceive that. If you'd have said that to somebody in 1991, 92, you thought, mad? Are you mad? The fact that our main rivals, you know, disappeared. Are you mad? That you know, so much has happened in that 30-year period. Some of the players that off the field, you know, the John Keanes, you know, I saw his obituary last week, and people reading that the first time I think, well, who's this guy? And so there was a lot of people, as you've found out yourself by doing the series, that, you know, they were doing things behind the scene and ultimately led to a successful outcome. People ask questions about the bank. Why the bank? In fact, 2 ways. Why the bank let it happen? Why the bank, when they got to 3 million, why did the bank not step in then? Or if the bank were lending money to the team across the city, why were they not lending us money? So there's lots of questions that still to be asked. And even there's 1 or 2 wee things that have happened in the last week or so, you and I have been saying, are you sure that how did this happen? Was it that person did this, or did this person do that? So yeah, it was a kind of mad time, but again, it's got a happy ending. And we are where we are just now because of that. If that hadn't happened, I think there would be a Celtic. Would we have this 60,000 stadium if somebody else had taken over? I'm not so sure, you know. And getting back to the play, because when Tam tells them, he says, "Look, this is what we're thinking of doing." Right? And old Joe's saying 60,000. How do you get that? And he says, "Well, you know, they've got 46,000, and we need to be bigger than them, because if we're bigger than them, we will leave them for dead. They'll be forever in our shadow." And he's saying, but 60,000? Why no 70, 80, you mad bastard? Why 60? You know, and it's just, again, I thought at the time, that's mad. That's just because, as I said earlier, that we were only 6,000 season ticket holders. There was no incentive. You rock up to the game, you get in, right? And I think we had a wee, maybe during the, just after our main rivals went bust and ended up with this new club in this down the bottom league, and with no opposition at all. and things started to tail off a wee bit, you know, and the upper tier Lisbon Lions is getting shut. I kind of thought, when I heard the 60,000 thing, but I thought in my mind, that's what it'll be like. Apart from the 2 Old Firm games that was called back then, apart from European games, and there was no such thing as a Champions League back then, apart from those games, what's the incentive of having a season ticket? And there is no incentive whatsoever. But fair is the division to doing that, because nowadays there's a waiting list for season, and I'm just seeing that in social media. People have saying, well, that's me, I'm still on the waiting list, that thing. Because in fact, I tried to get a relocation, because I go with my Todd, Billy Namates, and I can't get a relocation, which I find a bit surprising. I'm trying to get to the South Stand, but I think it's just old Joes go to the South Stand, so I don't think they let young guys like me who's 65, I think you have to be over 80 to get into the South Stand. So that's inconceivable that, you know, so we're all buying season tickets. Why? Because we don't want to lose our season ticket. And back then it would be, I'll just turn up at 10 to 3, I'll just wander in. And that's the different mindset. And the mindset also is the fact that because we're dealing with an all season, and now we're talking about safe standing sections because people like the atmosphere of that, and we have kind of lost that. But safety's paramount. And the bit about, you know, talking about what happened before the Centenary season, I also cover the Ibrox disaster, which leads to Hillsborough, you know, and people can't conceive the magnitude of the Ibrox disaster and what happened, you know.
There's a quote at the time, it'll be Chris White, Des White, I mix up the Whites.
Desmond White at the time, yeah.
And he said that, no, don't worry, our fans prefer to stand. So everyone was saying, what are you going to do? Rangers are moving ahead with the times, this futuristic new stadium. No, our guys prefer to stand. Just very, no canvassing, no polls put out, just top of the head, our guys prefer to stand. Which is
other words for we're skin. We don't want to spend money, we're not interested in spending money. And also the fact, kind of, again, at the start of the play, there's this kind of catch up with what's been happening since the club was formed. You get to a very, very quick rattle through kind of stuff, and then touches on the Ibrox disaster. You know, and then they've built this brilliant stadium and all these coloured seats, and then the person says, let me guess what colour they are. He says, no, different colours. So by the way, we put seats in our stand and they're orange. Just a kind of mindset of when you're going to put, you know, when they did up the stand with early 70s, whatever it was, you know, and what colour seats you going to put in there, guys? I tell you what would be good. Right for Celtic Park. Orange, is that right? Aye. Rubber stamp, let's do that. Whereas now, Celtic Park is green seats wherever you go. Imagine, it's some of the things they've done, you're just thinking, why? So how could you possibly trust, dyed in the wool Celtic supporters though they are, how can you trust them to take you into this next generation where money is everything, safety is everything, you know, and it was a death trap. That's one of the reasons old Joe comes to stay with him. He's fell in the jungle and hurt himself and he can't walk stick. You're not going back to that jungle. That's you finished. You come with us to the stand. No. So how can they cope with that? They can't. And everything was about money. And I'll bring me back to the very first thing I said, that if you're not a Celtic fan, if you're not an enthusiast, because this is all about emotion. All these Celtic plays are all about emotion. And we do with Celtic's emotion. We're dead excited today that the fixture list has come out. Because without the emotion, it's a dead simple story about a wee company, East End of Glasgow, that is into financial difficulties, and somebody comes along and buys them out, and the company does quite well, and they all live happily ever after. Whereas, as a fan, you were living that every single day at the time, and you can't see an end to that. And maybe bringing it back to the current day, until the bottle crashed at the end of March, start of April there, right, we're thinking we could lose this league, right? Imagine having that feeling for like 9 seasons. Not we could lose this league, we are going to lose this league, and we are completely powerless. And these guys are stopping it. Because if these guys aren't there, we've got a chance. While these guys are there, we will lose the league. And they talk about the banter years at the moment, which we love, and that's what football's about. I mean, as long as it's kind of, it's nothing too nasty. Banter years are good, given and taken, and that's absolutely fine. But imagine that late 80s, early 90s, that is the banter years that we're having just now in reverse. Although there wasn't social media then. But imagine having to face that from your workmates, friends, family, whoever, ramming that down your throat. 9's a formality, 10's a formality. Because you've seen Brattbakk, and Brattback's about the guy's having a heart attack and just he's no well, because 10 is a formality. It's a formality. And when you look back in that season, as I tried to do in Ben like Brattbakk, it could have went wrong at so many junctures, you know, and that's what people say, oh, to relive that again, it was a happy ending. Aye, but so yeah, it's just it's amazing to look back 30 years to see how far we've come. And you said at the start, the trophy hall, I think if you to look at any kind of indication, what's it do now and then, we expect to win trebles every single season. Yeah. We are whatever metric you use, we are the biggest club in the country. We've underachieved in Europe, certainly, for the past 20 years or so, and that's something we need to put right. But no matter what metric, no matter how much you maybe don't like certain people on the board or chief executives and like that, we are the biggest club. Dempsey says something like that, you are Celtic supporters. We are the biggest club in the land in any metric you want to use. And the fact that we've actually now equaled the number of trophies, this fictitious kind of like is a big thing. Yeah. You know, nobody can throw that as, not that we would say that at all, but to say you're the most successful club in the world is just is bonkers when you've got Real Madrid out there hoovering up Champions Leagues right, left and centre. It's like some wee kind of daft club in the middle of Africa saying, oh, we're the best because we're the best. No, you're no. So that's, I suppose that's ticked another one off the list there. And very quickly, you know, even if you back 10 years and say, well, even if you were taking that seriously, that thing, we're still quite a bit behind in that. Yeah. That kid-on league, we're quite far behind. But now actually, we'll level in the kid-on league. So I think we'll just bin the kid-on league and we'll move on. So. Do you know, 37 trophies, Jim, since the turn of the century, it's phenomenal. And as you say, by any metric, Celtic are the biggest club by a long stretch, but it wasn't the case not that long ago, and that's exactly what you cover. Jim, I'm really looking forward to seeing how you're going to put a humorous spin on what was a grand time, but I'm sure you will do it as always. Jim, a real pleasure to talk to you. Folks, do yourself a favour, jump on now, grab a couple of tickets for And If You Know the History at Webster's Theatre in October. I can guarantee you'll have a great night. Jim, thanks for coming in and best of luck with everything. Thank you, Tino. Cheers.